Welcome everyone. As you're checking in, it's lovely to see all of you here with us. Welcome if this is your first call with us, and welcome if you've been with us along the journey of our monthly connection points. We are so thrilled to start a new phase of this series. It'll feel a little different today. We have Sharon and Parker back with us, but we also have some incredible new guests that will share some additional perspectives. And so Aaron and I will move back into the hosting role. We'll keep an eye on the chat. So please throw in questions, comments, reactions as we go. And we'll come back at the end for some additional discussion. Back over to you, Aaron.
Thanks, Claire. We're super excited to have Reggie and Itzel with us today. And they'll be sharing with us through the session. They'll be in conversation with Sharon and Parker. Itzel, Reggie, thank you for coming and joining us. And our topic today is somatic awareness. And with that, Sharon, I think we'll pass it over to you to get us started.
Thank you. And I'm so delighted to be here with all of you and with our amazing guests. So what I was thinking about just earlier was how when I was younger and in, say, junior high school studying science, the idea about the brain was that there was no such thing as regeneration, that neuroplasticity did not exist. And the idea was really that unless you had like a terrible accident or some really unfortunate incident, by the time you were, say, in your 20s, that was it. And now with the idea of neuroplasticity, it's like a revolution in thinking that up until the day we die, that our brain can actually be generating new cells. And then I was thinking how subsequent to that, some years later, so even more recently, it's like the cutting edge thinking, the kind of radical view has to do, I think, with the body and with somatic awareness, and that we're just in this period of discovery and with a lot of questions. You know, what does the body have to do and awareness have to do of the body, of storing emotions or storing trauma or having a fuller experience of life? And so I'm really excited for this conversation to happen because I think it really does bring us to that kind of cutting edge. So I'd like to start by inviting Reggie to lead us in a breath meditation.
Sharon, thank you for the invitation. Blessings and best wishes to all. Happy to be here. Happy right now because we're all over the world. So morning, evening, happy right now, happy present moment to each of you. And before we begin our meditation, Sharon mentioned the somatic awareness. The one thing that animates this thing we call the body is the breath. And it's the thing that we often take the most for granted. So what I'm going to offer are a few cues, but we're going to offer different way stations along the point. So like if you can't go a little deeper, that's cool. Just stay where you are. So beginning in your seat, so find a tall, comfortable seat, whatever that means. This could be upright spine. You could take this laying down. And since our inclination is to have shoulders up, take the shoulders up and back, and maybe even make some shoulder rolls and keep the shoulders up and back, please. Given our sedentary computerized lifestyle, we tend to walk around like Tyrannosaurus Rex. So keep the shoulders back and down. And soften the gaze or close the eyes. If closing the eyes isn't accessible, soften the gaze at bare minimum to rest the optic nerve. And just feel your feet on the ground. We rarely take the opportunity to slow down. So let's slow down not only for ourselves, but in community, because when we slow down in community, it kind of aggregates the benefit. So feeling the feet on the ground, keeping shoulders back and down, just for a moment, pause and feel grounded. We live in pretty turbulent times. And so at bare minimum, the way I've been teaching lately is like if the sun rises in the east and sets in the west and gravity still works, we're at a good starting point. So feel the benefit of gravity, not only as a phenomenon of Earth, but as a nurturing agent. So grounded in the feet, nurtured by gravity. And then begin to notice the breath. So rather than shape it at the moment, notice it. Is it short? Is it long? Is it in the chest? Is it in the belly? Just notice where it is and notice the mystery of it. Again, the key to somatic awareness is just the breath animates the apparatus. So just give gratitude for it, because without it, we don't exist. And building upon this groundedness in the feet, with keeping shoulders back and down, noticing the breath. Maybe begin to take a deep inhale through the nose and a deep exhale out the nose. And if taking a deeper breath isn't accessible for you, then stay grounded in the feet and keep shoulders back and down, eyes lowered. But if breathing is accessible to you, deep inhales through the nose, exhales out the nose, eyes soft. Smooth and easy, and take the breath as deep as you're able. Nothing fancy, just in through the nose, out through the nose. And enjoy whatever cadence you found in through the nose, out through the nose for the next moment or so. Beginning our conversation from this sense of grounding, from this sense of appreciation of the breath. And for those of you who care to take it a little bit deeper, with every exhale, invite areas of the body to soften. Maybe the shoulders soften, maybe the face softens. With 3 or 4 more breaths in this cadence, rooted in the feet, comfortable in the seat, shoulders back and down. Simply breathing in through the nose, out through the nose. Two more like that. Bottom of the next exhale, if comfortable, bring hands to heart center, press into the hands, keep shoulders back and down. We'll take 2 inhales through the nose and exhales out the mouth, because I think we could all use a good sigh. So deep inhale through the nose, please. Exhale out the mouth. Actually, let's take 2 more of those. In through the nose, please. Exhale out the mouth. Last one, deepest inhale thus far. Exhale out the mouth. Bow of gratitude to each of you for allowing me to lead you through this practice. Sharon and Parker, back to you.
Well, thank you so much, Reggie. I feel different and I feel better, and I appreciate that opportunity. So good to be with Itzel and Reggie, and again with Sharon and with the whole well-being community. I want to just remind us that the last time we met, we talked about the divided life and the whole journey toward becoming and living divided no more. I don't think there's any more painful or grave form of dividedness than when we divide the body from our sense of self. Such a fundamental division between spirit and stuff, between, as it were, word and flesh, can't possibly be a good thing. And I think we have a lot of experience of how it's a bad thing in many ways. To forget something as fundamental as what Reggie just taught us about the breath and how it animates the body. In my case, I was educated away from my body. And the farther I went in my education, the farther away I got from this physical vehicle that carries my spirit through life. But I had a moment of insight when I heard the late neurobiologist Candace Pert talk about the fact that the brain may occupy the top inch or so of the body, in the skull, but that the mind, distinct from the brain, occupies the entire body. The mind is found throughout the body. And that understanding, began to transform for me my understanding of why I needed to pay attention to my body. Attention seems to be the key to so much in life, doesn't it? And I want to share with you a very brief little poem that I rediscovered. I had forgotten about it after Itzel and Sharon and Reggie and I had a chance to prepare for this session. Years and years ago, I had an experience of my body that remains quite striking to me today. And in this brief little poem, which I'll paste in the chat in case anybody wants to see it, I recovered something of my sense of bodily self. It's called body work. Something settled in my body today, or something was settled, I should say. A question, an issue, a quandary unsolved, dropped from debate into living tissue, and in the body's wisdom was resolved. That was a moment for me, and it lives for me through that poem, that the body is capable of solving problems that we can't solve with our minds. And I'm grateful for this whole conversation as a reminder of all of that. So Sharon, back to you.
Thank you so much. The beautiful poem. Where do poems come from? That's an interesting question in this context. So I think the experience of being somehow disembodied is common while not universal. And I think of that now famous line from James Joyce, where he said something like, Mr. Duffy lived a short distance from his body. And I think about the experience I have often, say, in teaching something like walking meditation, where I find that people often cannot feel their feet against the ground till they look down. And it's like, oh, something's happening there. And there are consequences, of course, for us in living in that way. So Itzel, I'd like to ask you if you can speak about what happens when we don't pay attention to our body as a lived experience.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that question. And thank you everyone for having me today. It's an honor to be here with you all. So, somewhere, somehow, many of us have developed this false belief that our body shouldn't need directed, focused attention. And when we live in that way, when we ignore our bodies, we've really failed to notice dysfunction as it arises, or even just changes, whether they're dysfunctional or not, as they arise. You alluded when you were earlier speaking, Sharon, that our body stores emotions, it stores trauma. All these things live in the body, and when we ignore them, we get used to the dysfunction that arises. We begin to ignore and just get used to these changes that occur. Or we are embarrassed to call attention to them or get help for them. And so dysfunction then becomes our new normal, and it turns into disease in the body. So our body is really trying to tell us something. And what our job is to do in order to take care of the body is to really listen. There's this beautiful old saying that goes something like, disease knocks 3 times, and if you don't listen, the 3rd time it takes you. And that's what happens when we don't listen to the body. And, what's really ironic is that the more our bodies demand our attention, oftentimes the more resentful, when we have that disconnect, the more resentful we become. And then eventually we get this wake-up call in the form of some kind of breakdown or really major disruption in the body's functioning. And then we end up loading ourselves with guilt that we should have taken care of it when we first saw those warnings. But when we live with the disconnect, we don't even see the warnings at all.
Do you think all strong emotions are stored in the body in some way? Has that been your experience?
It has been my experience. And I don't mean necessarily only painful emotions, also joyful emotions. But I do believe they are stored there. That's been my experience. Absolutely. And it shows up in ways, the way we move through the world, it shows up.
Thank you, Itzel. I have a question for Reggie about how we develop somatic awareness, but I was reminded when you were talking about something that I didn't even recognize as body trauma that happened in the course of my life. So when I was a teenager, I was as tall as I am now, 6'4" or so, but weighed a lot less than I do now and was very uncoordinated. So every basketball coach who saw me walk into the school thought, oh, we got a state championship here, until he watched me try to dribble a ball down the court and fall down more often than the ball hit the floor. And so I had, my body was not my friend in terms of, who was popular or who was making it in the high school environment, which was often the athletes. And I think it drove me to take refuge in my mind and maybe in my sense of humor as my tools for social acceptability of some sort. But for a long time, I didn't like my body at all, and I didn't know why. But considering these ideas and doing some of this work took me back to that what would seem like a very low-level trauma of not being able to be an athlete, and yet left me with a very poor body image and even a sense of being burdened by the body I had. So Reggie, I'm very interested to know how it is that we develop, men and women alike, how it is that we develop the kind of somatic awareness that can help us shake off some of these traumatic experiences, large and small, and guide us faithfully through life.
Well, I want to thank you for the question and just share my experience really briefly. Like for those of you that can't tell, like I'm 6'2", 260, so I'm a big dude as well. And everyone thought I played American football. And I'm like, I don't, right? And so my formative years, everyone was objectifying me as an athlete, especially because of the color of my skin, but that's a completely different other thing. But everyone was just like, you play football, boy? I'm like, no, I'm an existential philosophy major. Like, well, yikes, you know what I mean? And so I had this, to your experience, I had a connection with all things cerebral and didn't really have any desire to connect with the body because I was like, I'm not an athlete. And, to your point also, I became kind of resentful for that affiliation and just dove into cerebral pursuits. I mean, and, did quite well, philosophy major, marketing, savant, all these things. But at 38 years old, I woke up and was just like, you are 130 kilo, you know what I mean? And you don't sleep. And, I just had, luckily for me, I didn't have a breakdown to what Itzel talked about. Like I didn't have a breakdown, but I woke up one day and was like, okay, brother, you've got sugar, which is diabetes for the uninitiated. You got sugar on one side of your family, you've got cancer on the other side of your family, and you're sitting here acting like you aren't genetically predisposed to these things. So what are you going to do about it? So luckily for me, I had like the disembodied, what are you going to do? Like, wake up, you're living, you're out, So luckily I had that experience and just began, quite honestly, the way that we began the webinar, looked at my body, was just like, okay, so what are you gonna do with this, right? And just started at the beginning, right? So looked at myself and just started developing unrelenting compassion for self. Was just like, okay, doesn't really matter how you got here, you're here. and how will you take the next step forward toward getting better? So for me, it just became with a radical presence, radical acceptance of where I was. Then it was like, okay, so, and you gain this weight through your relationship with food. Maybe you need to change your relationship with that, okay? You only exercise when you're running to catch a plane, right? So maybe you should have a little bit more purposeful exercise, right? So it's just that unrelenting compassion and just the dialing in of the minutia of my lived experience that began the path, which has now become like yoga teacher, meditation teacher, and those sorts of things. But it began with a radical, like, look at myself in the mirror, just like, okay, buddy, if you don't do something now, you are either going to have diabetes or cancer or both. What are you going to do about that? So just asking, again, I had to have that compassion for self. But then with that compassion, I had the action and started taking small steps toward what I needed to do for myself.
Yeah, that's helpful, that kind of awareness that comes through pain or sense of threat or danger. You once told me in a previous conversation, Reggie, that when people would ask if you were an athlete, you would say, yeah, I play right tackle on the chess team, which I thought was a brilliant answer. I may use that myself, although I'm no good at chess. I want to point out, and I don't know whether you want to add a word about this, that the context in which you work now and have done a lot of work is the American political system. You do a lot of work with people on Capitol Hill. Yeah. And I've often felt that, among the disembodied professions, politics has got to be one of the worst.
Yeah, and I'll mention it briefly. So one of the blessings of my teaching practice, and Sharon and I've talked about this at some point, is that I teach meditation to members of Congress and congressional staff. And I had the blessing of teaching 2 offices after the insurrection on January 6th. And one of the reflections that I got from them is that one staffer, after I led them through like a somatic awareness and a bit of the practice I'm going to share in a moment, is that he was like, I haven't felt in my body or laughed in a week. And that was such a blessing. It actually made me quite emotional because they trusted me enough to share my little quirky practice with them, but it gave them an opportunity to feel. It gave them an opportunity to not only feel, but discharge, right? So rather than be disembodied and be like, oh, that didn't happen, or I can't deal with this, or those sorts of things, they were just like, okay, this is happening. I don't necessarily like it, right? So they were able to settle into it. And Itzel talked about this a little bit as well. The body is telling us things all the time, and it's not to be a sourpuss. The body's like, hey, yo, help me out here, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, but for all of us, we're all activists in some form or fashion. I want us to entertain, perhaps the body's here to help you do your work. Perhaps the body is the vehicle through which you make beautiful change in the world. And so as such, we need to treat it as the beautiful dance partner that it is, as opposed to the stepchild. You know what I mean? So that's one thing that I want us to consider.
Thank you.
Well, it seems that the reasons, which we'll discuss in a little while, why one moves more toward that disembodied sense, are complex. There are many different reasons. And so the movement to reweave that connection is also a little bit complex, which could involve a lot of different factors and bring up a lot of different things. And we decided in planning this session that we really wanted to be as pragmatic as possible and as experiential as possible. So it would seem really weird to be sitting and talking about the experience of the body and just be floating above, and not be coming back always to that possibility. So I want to invite Reggie again to lead us in the session of somatic awareness or some kind of exercise. And I think just urge everybody to understand that there is this complexity, and you may feel, and I'm sure he'll describe, all kinds of different things, including great numbness or whatever. And I loved your phrase, Reggie, about, I have to find it again in the chat, about compassion, unrelenting compassion for self, which is really brilliant. And that's really the context and the basis with which we're doing everything.
Well, thank you for the invitation, Sharon, and everyone. Listen, so this simple practice, and we're going to stay in our seat basically. So so it's super simple. This is what I teach members of Congress, right? This is what I teach political who are too busy. You know what I mean? I don't have time for this. Yeah, you do. It's 5 minutes. Like, settle down. So what I want you to do is find that same tall seat that you did earlier, because look at this. So we spend our lives like this. Does this look healthy? No, I mean, if you're like trying not to be a Tyrannosaurus Rex, so I teach a kids yoga class and we do T-Rex, that's a different thing. Exactly. I see you, Bilal. What up, dinosaur? Right? So if you want to be a T-Rex, that's cool, but we're not. We're human beings. So instead of being like this, we're going to open things up. So shoulders back and down as we begin. Bring your hands together. Clasp your fingers together. And then to gently begin to make wrist circles here. And if your wrists begin to pop, that's wrist language saying, thank you for remembering that I go in 360 degrees. Wrists can't speak English or whatever your mother tongue is, but they do talk to us in ways. And this is synovial fluid being reenacted in the wrists, right? Because we're like this all the time. So yikes, right? Take that in the other direction. Notice how the wrists and the hands are beginning to feel a little bit A, different, maybe B, even better, right? Simply beginning with the wrists. Now pause, begin to make waves, so to speak. I grew up in the 80s, so maybe this is like pop locking and breakdancing, but also notice how the wrists and the shoulders are connected. And so what I want you to do is begin to make whatever movement calls out to you here, feeling the connection between the wrists and the shoulders, thinking of it as therapeutic and fun. And the other thing I want to show you with this is that taking care of yourself can be cool and fun, like it ain't just like, oh my God, like this totally sucks, right? So just finding a way to do this here. So you did your favorite way, do the way that becomes less intuitive. So everyone has their Instagram side, like find your MySpace side, right? So find the side that's less intuitive. And find those circles, noticing the connection between the wrists and the shoulders. And so instead of being like this, we're opening it up, yeah? Now, take those fingers, press them forward. Inhale, arms overhead, open the chest. Exhale, come down. Inhale up. Exhale down. Inhale up. And down, 3 more. Inhale up. Exhale down, 2. Inhale up. Exhale down. Last one. Inhale up. Stay up there and begin to twist from side to side. 3 or 4 times, nothing crazy. Now release the fingers and notice how the fingers feel. What you don't know is I just snuck a finger stretch on you, right? So the fingers that are like this for hours are now open. So now if I were to ask you how many millions of dollars you want someone to just offer you, just go like this in increments of 10. So not only is this like a wish for financial abundance, it's an opportunity to stretch the fingers from like this position, right? Now take those liberated fingers and massage your face. Top of the head, behind the ears, brow, jaw. If you find a spot that's kind of tingly, exhale out the mouth. Right? We're awakening all the neurotransmitters, all the neurons in the head, softening the face because we sit like this for hours. Yikes. Right, soften it up. So 30 more seconds or so of this. I love the smiles I'm seeing. You're welcome. Maybe even take this to the neck. I told you, like taking care of yourself can be fun. Now, shoulders back and down, pause here. We got 2 more things and then I'm done. But notice how you feel. Is there a tingling? Is there a light? This is vitality. This is how a healthy body feels. And imagine like having this edge in your work. Like part of the reason that I was able to go on Capitol Hill and do my thing is because I feel this good. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm gonna go do this. So anyway, take the chin towards the chest, please. And gently take neck from one ear, so left ear towards left shoulder, right ear towards right shoulder, because the neck was getting kind of jealous. Neck was like, shoulders, cool. What about me? So we got you, neck, don't worry. Next time, right ears towards right shoulder, keep it there. And if you want a little bit more, take right fingers outside of left temple. Then take left hand and begin to massage from mandible to clavicle, jawbone to collarbone, massage your neck. Because when was the last time you massaged your neck? If you find a juicy spot, exhale out the mouth. Offering care and loving attention, loving kindness to the neck. 3 exhales out the mouth, and then we'll take it to the other side. Inhale through the nose. Exhale out the mouth. Let it go. Inhale. Exhale. Last inhale. Exhale, release right fingers, come through center. Pause. Notice that the right side of the neck is hella jealous. Then take left ear towards left shoulder. Take that on the other side. So about 30 seconds here, maybe even closing the eyes or softening the gaze and getting into the sensory experience, being less analytical and more somatically aware. If you care to chuckle, imagine members of Congress doing this. Exactly. You're welcome, Sharon. 3 exhales out the mouth, in through the nose, exhale out the mouth. Inhale, exhale. Last inhale, exhale, release left fingers, chin to center, head level, shoulders back and down, pausing here. Feel how you feel from chest up. If you feel even a little bit better, give me a thumbs up. That's the exercise. So that's simple. You took care of your neck, shoulders, and face. So like I said, your hours like this, in 6 minutes, now you feel a little bit better. So that's what I got.
Thank you so much. I think you can save our republic.
He's in process. He's working it. He's doing it. So the word that always comes up in my mind in doing these kind of exercises is connection, which of course brings up the prospect of disconnection and all of the consequences of that, and just the sheer joy of connecting and being so fully present in that moment. Is really great. And so I remembered in the middle of it this time, the first time I actually ever taught international humanitarian aid workers, and which was a huge learning experience for me. And one of the things people said was that as they moved more into burnout and this sense of not being able to connect to, say, the vibrancy of the work or the meaningfulness of the work, they move more into exhaustion and feeling cut off and disconnected. One of the first obvious signs of that was that people stopped following safety protocols in the same way, and they stopped taking care of themselves. And so, Reggie, when you use that term, that's what popped into my mind, is that here is a sign, that there's some kind of disconnection going on. And so I just really, tremendously appreciated what you just did. I do now have forever image of various members of Congress. I don't know who they were, but I'll imagine who they were. And that's how I'm going to see them from now on. And I know from my meditation experience that as we are reconnecting, we want something that's immediate, that's accessible, that's not like kind of highfalutin and hard to find, that's not going to take equipment. You know, it's something that we can reach right away. So that brings me to the question of the breath. And Itzel, I'd like to ask you if you could speak some about that.
Absolutely. Yeah, the breath is such a powerful tool because it's something that we always have with us. We can always come back to our breath. And in terms of increasing our somatic awareness, the breath can deeply support us through the listening process. So the body's need for air and the breath is in a constant state of adjustment and change. It's different from moment to moment, whether you're being physically active or sedentary, whether you're tense or relaxed. You know, it's very, very tied also to the emotional state, not just physical. So you can use the body's relationship to the breath to inform you of your own mental and emotional state, right? So when we're tense or afraid, the breath can be a little bit faster, more shallow, we may notice. When we're feeling really easeful and spacious, maybe we notice the breath is a little lower and we're feeling it in the belly, a real slowing and expansive breath in the belly. So it's a really powerful link between the two. And what's really powerful too, it's not just the breath responding to the mental and emotional state, but we can also use the breath to influence the mental state. So we can work in the other direction. So consciously taking deep, slow breaths, for example, can really help calm us down when we're feeling really tense or anxious, right? So it communicates by taking those slow, deep breaths, we're communicating to the mind that everything's okay. In this moment, everything's fine. And we can actually shift our mental state. So the role of the breath is super important. And like I said, it's just something that we always have at our disposal to use.
My first meditation teacher said something like encouraging. That was actually the first meditation I ever did, was just sit and feel your breath. And he said, the breath is very portable. And I thought, yeah. And another thing I really like about it, I mean, I don't know about taking a very deep conscious breath or exhaling loudly through your mouth or whatever, but it's also very private. Like you may be in a situation where you feel a need to settle, you feel a need to center, you feel a need to reconnect, like reconnecting in that moment with yourself, which it's a vehicle for. And you don't want to, look strange. And although now I'm, into like all kinds of different possibilities that I'm going to bring into my my list, but there's the breath. Nobody even has to know you're doing it.
Yeah.
So I was just going to say, I love that because it's like an intimacy. It's an intimacy you're creating with yourself, and that's helping to foster that connection and that listening process. So thank you for bringing that in.
I'm so struck as we talk, and thank you for these reminders about breath. At how I forget this stuff, or my body forgets it, I guess, or I mislead my body. And that's the question that I want to pose to Reggie. I have, one of my great passions is writing. I wouldn't know how to get through a day if I couldn't write. And sometimes I get very deep into my writing, as people must in contemplation. And I suddenly notice I'm not breathing. I've been holding my breath for I don't know how long, because I'm so utterly focused and even obsessed. It leads me to ask the question, Reggie, as to what it is that takes us away from our bodies. I mean, everything about breath is such common sense stuff, right? I mean, that's how we survive, by breathing. And not being able to breathe is a calamity, and we see it all over our world these days. From George Floyd to COVID-19, people are profoundly concerned about not breathing, and yet there must be things in our human makeup that take us away and obstruct that very elemental bodily practice. What's your experience with that?
Thank you for the question. And so there's several things that can take folks away. One is that, you know, as an African-American male, there are a series of systemic oppression that seeks to take the life out of my body. You know, like in the past, they used to hang us from trees, right? And you saw what they did to Brother Floyd. But there's also less from a systemic societal perspective. There's, you know, as an activist or a recovering activist or all the things, right? As a human being who's a constant work in progress, we get addicted to the work, right? You know, we get addicted to activity. We get and tethered to the notion of doing as opposed to being. And, you know, one of the things that has changed most profoundly in my life, and, you know, and I've shared this with the 5 of y'all, but I'll share it with my new family. I used to weigh 150 kilos, right? Like 330 pounds, because I was so focused on political work. Like I was on these political campaigns. I went from campaign to campaign to campaign. I worked 18 hours a day. Like I would smoke Parliament cigarettes and drink Jack Daniels for breakfast. Yes, yogi, black hippie, would drink Jack Daniels and smoke Parliament cigarettes for breakfast. That is not the breakfast of champions. Like I was joking with Aaron, like maybe if it was like a cognac or something, it would be different, but like Jack Daniels for breakfast is not cute. And, but I did it because I was addicted to the work and thought that I was making a difference, and perhaps I was making a difference, but at a net negative to myself, right? And so what I came to find out, and this is, you know, when I talked earlier about like at 38, I looked in the mirror, I was like, yo, what are you doing, man? Like, this is like, what are you doing? I noticed that my body is that dance partner. And if I take care of her, or if I take care of the partner, then we can do some amazing things, you know? So, but it's easy. And, you know, I speak from experience, you know, thank you for the comments in the chat about like my lifestyle. Like I'm so transparent because I'm one of y'all, you know what I mean? Like I've been on the front lines of some of the biggest transformative changes in the United States and have done it the wrong way, which was like at a self-destructive pace, and have learned, thankfully, to incorporate better practices, and not only incorporate better practices, but, you know, luckily have the opportunity to share my lived experience with you. So hopefully some of the practices that I've created and or experienced can be of benefit to you. But, you know, in conclusion, I would say that we get addicted to the work. We think we're making a difference, and because we become disembodied, we see externally what's happening, but ignore what's happening with the body. No, and so it's a net negative. So yeah, you're creating positive change, but you're running yourself into the ground. So that's actually a net negative.
There's this clear link, it seems to me, between forgetting to breathe and forgetting the body, becoming so obsessed with a cause that we end up doing violence to ourselves.
Yeah.
We violate our bodies. We violate the biological process that keeps us alive and well. And having done that, what would we not violate? That translates into outer violence of many sorts, it seems to me. People just bouncing off the walls of the world, negligent of their own health, and therefore negligent of the health of the whole and of others. So I'm reaching here for this link, Itzel, between all of these things we're talking about and fundamental practices of nonviolence. I'm a Quaker, and in the Quaker community, preparation for nonviolence often involves breathing exercises, forms of meditation and contemplation, you know, centering into what Thomas Merton called true self, or what Quakers might call the light in every human being. Because from that place, once you're there, you can't do violence, or you become much more sensitive to violating yourself in ways that might lead to violating others. And I know your work has woven these themes together in the form of nonviolent communication. And I'd love for you to talk about that a bit, and when you're ready, to lead us in a practice that will help us understand those links better.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was, thank you so much for that introduction and those beautiful words. I was really drawn myself to nonviolent communication because I didn't know how to champion my own needs in a healthy way. And I saw being nonviolent for a long time, caring for other people, but not caring for myself. So there was a way that I was doing violence to myself, and I wasn't really aware of it because of this disembodied, a lot of it was because of this disembodied relationship that I had. I wasn't even aware of the harm I was doing to myself. And I came to nonviolent communication through that path, and I now really use it as a tool for social justice and racial justice advocates to communicate in loving and compassionate ways, and to also effectively and persuasively talk to others, to families and friends, and people in power in a way that helps us work together to find solutions that work for all. And underlying this practice, and let me back up a little to say, like with every practice, every communication practice, I should say, nonviolent communication has these two elements, right? How we speak and how we listen. And we would expect that of any communication practice. And what really drew me to nonviolent communication in particular as a practice was the deep awareness that underlying all of that, both how we speak and how we listen, is this awareness of our thoughts and our judgments, and also of our feelings and needs as an inner experience, as a lived experience. It's really a practice of noticing when we're out of balance and recognizing what we need to bring ourselves back into balance so that we can listen and so that we can speak effectively. And at its core, nonviolent communication is really based on one fundamental principle, that all actions, every human action, whether it's our own or those of others, every action is an attempt to meet some universal human need, some deep core value. And these needs create a shared basis, right, for all of us to connect with each other and to be connected, to feel our connection with all of life. And creating this connection with others requires cultivating a deep sense of internal connection to ourselves. And that's really that was the big piece that I was missing, that I feel like I got so much out of nonviolent communication, to discover that and to understand that as I increased my ability to understand myself, to connect with my own inner experience, I began, and we all began, to foster this sense of interconnectedness, of understanding with all others. And we're more likely then to take actions that take everyone's needs into account. Because once we activate empathy, both for ourselves, right? So self-empathy, that unrelenting compassion that Brother Reggie mentioned, empathy for ourselves and empathy for other people. Once we activate that, compassion is the most logical response. So yeah, please, Parker.
No, I'm just affirming what you said. It's so interesting to me that I didn't know that was the route you took into nonviolent communication, but it's really fascinating to me that this is the case. So I would love to have you share with us a practice that might, further embody this for us.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll do this practice of looking within, and I'll do a practice on emotions. And emotions are quite literally feelings. They are feelings we feel in the body as sensation. And so we'll play with that now. Let's play with that a little bit right now. So come to a comfortable position. You could be sitting, standing, lying down, however you're most comfortable. Allow the eyes to gently close or have them slightly downward. Soften the gaze, turn the focus within. And we'll start by bringing the awareness to the breath. Just checking in with how you're doing. And there's really nothing you need to do but notice what's already there. Be with the experience of breathing. Watch the breath. Where do you notice the breath? Maybe it's in the rising and falling of the chest or abdomen, or the movement of the air in the nostrils. Maybe it's the gentle sound of the breath. Wherever it is you notice, let the attention rest there. You may notice the attention wander with the mind. If you notice that, just gently bring it back to the breath. And now if there is an emotion alive in you in this moment, see if you can connect with that emotion. And there's always an emotion that's alive in us, but we may not notice it. We may not see it. And that's okay too. Notice that. And emotions, feelings shift and change. So notice, what are you feeling now? Is it the same or different? Do you notice any body sensations associated with what you're feeling now? And internally, where do you go internally to see what you're feeling? And what are you feeling now? Where do you feel that feeling in the body? And now gently turn the attention back to the breath. Noticing the breath. There's nothing you need to do, the body breathing itself. And as you're ready, gently opening the eyes, coming back into this space. Thank you, friends.
Thank you so much for that. And there are a couple of things I just wanted to say before we turn to hearing from people with questions. I've always been fascinated about the relationship between kind of that sense of the body and communication. Because in watching people being guided through a form of communication training, whatever kind, there's this moment where we're asked to go deeper, where we can't just accuse somebody like, you never show up for me, but we go to a deeper place to be really more vulnerable and more truthful, which is, I long to be close to you, maybe. And when you walked away, I felt, so where do we go for that information if we choose to be that truthful and that vulnerable, depending on where we are. And that is some knowing within ourselves, that isn't necessarily cognitive. Well, when I accuse somebody of not paying attention to me, it really is usually likely linked. I mean, the cognitive understanding is wonderful, but in that moment, I think it is a more kind of inner sense, just as you were describing. And the other thing is, I'd read a study, and I'm looking forward to more studies about the role of interoception, that inner sense of sensation in one's body, and empathy, which made a lot of sense to me, because when we are talking about the kind of resonance of empathy, like a felt sense almost vibrating along with that person, say, who looks like they're struggling, the more in tune we are, the more we have that facility to vibrate along with somebody else. So I think your teaching pointed to both those.
Yeah, and the cognitive understanding, I think that you're right, it can be so helpful. And even in nonviolent communication, in that training, people can get stuck there. Like, okay, I have my list of feelings and I have my list of needs, and now all I need to do is just match the one to the other, and I got it.
Right.
Exactly like you said, the invitation is to go deeper than that.
Yeah, it's more complicated than swiping left or right, right?
Yes.
I just wanted to offer one quick reflection on the nonviolent communication, which is an essential part of my work is body language. So when I'm in a tough conversation or a negotiation with people who I do not agree with politically, I've noticed that if you're like this, so part of somatic awareness is knowing if someone says something, like in my line, they used to tell me to fix your face. So my parents used to always tell me to fix my face because someone would say something, I'd be like this, right? So having somatic awareness allows you to kind of keep like a placid demeanor, or I mean, in my work, people say wild stuff all the time. So rather than being like, I'm like, that's an interesting perspective, might you consider this? So like, body language is also can be nonviolent communication, and having somatic awareness of how you're rendering your face, or like if someone's talking and you're like this, you're not open, you know what I mean? So like that's another part of somatic awareness is body language, and we could talk about that forever, but that's just something that emerged from not only my experience, but as a reflection.
Yeah, I'd like to have a side session with you, Reggie, on the question of whether it's possible to put that nice face on and say something else, like, are you out of your mind? I would find that useful at times.
Maybe you just have to start doing this,
Right.
like you're getting to me.
Well, I think, is it time for the Uber well-being team to take over?
Well, in a way, to come back to hosting all four of you with questions that the group has had. And just to start by saying thank you to Reggie, to you, and to Itzel already for what you've shared, to Parker and to Sharon for the hosting. It's been incredible to be part of this and to witness this. And perhaps no surprise, there's a set of different questions that have come up from people. And one thing we'll just mention, what's wonderful about this question and answer space is that Parker and Sharon are committed to answering the questions that have come up in written form. So we'll be circling back with answers to all the questions. They've been asked very poignantly, and we want to be very respectful and thoughtful about that. So just to say, to mention that commitment up front, and you can keep putting questions into the chat, knowing that we'll circle back with those. And Parker, Sharon, thank you for also being up for engaging with this community in that kind of way. And so Claire, maybe I can pass it over to you for the first question.
Sure, thanks, Aaron. Itzel, this is for you, I think, to kick us off. One area we haven't talked about yet, but is very connected with this conversation is sleep. And would love to hear if you have thoughts on sleeping well, sleeping better at this time, any practices that you can recommend, anything that we can take with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you for that question. That's a beautiful question. I do have a practice that I really enjoy. So I've been teaching yoga for about 10 years now, but I was introduced to yoga very young. And it's with this practice, which is also known as yoga nidra, which is roughly translated to conscious sleep. And the ancients have said that 1 hour of this practice is as restful and restorative as 4 hours of deep sleep. I've not tested that on myself personally, but I have found that on days when I do have maybe not enough sleep that I need, this can be such a powerful practice to really keep me going on this yoga nidra practice. And I encourage my students, when I teach this, I encourage my students to actually stay awake so that they can experience the experience of the practice. But falling asleep isn't uncommon and probably would happen if, or at least a deeper rest would happen if you're doing this in your bed. And it is a practice that's typically done lying down. So if you do it in your bed, it can very likely trigger sleep. But even if not, like I said, you get the rest of the practice. So I would love to guide folks through a short practice. All right, great. So like I said, it's typically done lying down. So if you'd like to lie down, by all means, feel free. You can lie on the back with something underneath the knees, can help take pressure off of the lower back. But you can also do this practice sitting or even standing as well. So again, just letting the eyes gently close and letting yourself really just relax into the surface that's supporting you. So it's not like you have to sit up straight or anything. Just make yourself as comfortable as you can be wherever you are at. Let the body just sink into the surface that's supporting it. You can even maybe shift the body a little bit, do whatever you need to do to make yourself even 5% more comfortable, any shifting or adjusting. And just recognizing there's nowhere to go, nothing to do. Simply here, feeling the body and just following my breath. And if you don't hear everything I say, that's fine. You may notice that you're flowing in and out of conscious hearing. And just recognize there's a deeper part of you, your deeper self, that's always listening. So whatever you experience, that is the practice. There's no way to do it wrong. Feel the body heavy and sinking into the surface, supporting it. And go deep inside now. Deep inside, and notice your heart's deepest longing. And create an intention or affirmation based on this deepest longing. And in the case of sleep, or a desire to sleep, you can even state that as the deepest longing, or I am at ease and at peace, or I am relaxed. Whatever is your own intention, just silently repeat it to yourself 3 times and state it in the present tense as if already true in this moment. And now together we'll do a body scan, just allowing the awareness to travel through the body, just feeling each part as it's mentioned without moving, letting the body remain still and welcoming whatever sensation you notice. And if you notice no sensation at all, that's fine too. And so starting with the toes, noticing the toes and the feet, the ankles, lower legs, noticing sensation in the knees and the upper legs, the hips and pelvis. Noticing sensation along the front of the torso, the back of the torso. Bringing the awareness to the fingers now, noticing the fingers and hands, wrists, lower arms, elbows and upper arms. Notice sensation in the shoulders, the neck, the jaw. The muscles of the face, the sides and the back of the head, the top of the head. The entire body, present, relaxed, and still. Now bring the awareness to the breath without altering it or changing it in any way. Allowing the body to breathe itself and you as a silent witness of the breath. Noticing the thoughts now as they move through the mind without getting attached to them or even believing them. Simply watching the thoughts in the same way you might watch clouds moving through a vast sky. You as a silent witness of the mind and its thoughts. And now bringing the awareness to the deep stillness within. That stillness that's always there. It may sometimes feel more difficult to access in times of emotion or busyness, but it's always there, always available to you. That peace is your true nature. And with awareness of that peace as your true nature, gently begin coming back to the breath, back to the body. You can wiggle the fingers and toes, any gentle stretches or movements to help you come back into this experience of having this body in this moment. And as you're ready, gently opening the eyes. And so this is a guided practice that you can find an hour-long practice of this, and it's so powerful to move you right into a deeper state of relaxation and even sleep.
Thank you, Itzel. That was really, really wonderful. And just for everyone to know, we'll be sharing out a recording for everyone and breaking some of this into segments. So you'll be able to find pieces done by Reggie, pieces done by Itzel, and we'll also connect you with different resources that they make available as well, just to make it easy to access that. And then before jumping into the next question, which has come up in a couple of different ways, maybe I'll just invite Erica on our team to put in a link to a second thing that will be happening this month. One of the things that this community has asked is that there be a space to go deeper into and to reflect together on what's shared in these webinars. We had a number of people sign up for that at the end of the last session. And so we'll be organizing it for later this month with the wonderful Dean of our Inner Work Programs, Nancy Mortefi, who will be hosting members of the community just in reflecting further on this in a cafe style conversation. Thank you, Nancy. So this is a question to all four of you. We have a few minutes left, and this is in some ways a big question. So this might need thoughtful communication. And so I'll ask the question in the two different ways that it's come up, which is, can one of the speakers give another example of how trauma shows up in the body? What are we looking out for? Or in a related question, how do you navigate the fact that the body keeps the score? And when starting to connect with it again, a lot of unbearable pain that's trauma-based first comes up. How do you navigate that dynamic when working in a collective setting?
Well, knowing that we only have a short period of time, and that's a big, important question I'm so glad was asked. I would say to begin with the breath, and to be very compassionate with yourself. So watching the breath will give you so much information about where you're at in any given moment. And you'll begin, as you begin listening, you'll begin being able to recognize when the breath is telling you you're in a trauma response. There's so much I could say, and I would love to hear from the others as well, but I would encourage you to start with the breath and to be gentle with yourself.
I'll go after that. Thank you, Itzel. So for me, I can tell, like, from my lived experience, the inner critic, which is here, starts to scream. And so that's when the unrelenting compassion is born, right? So like when I was way overweight and started to exercise, the inner critic was like, you dumb, like you suck, like that inner critic would go. And then the unrelenting compassion piece would be like, you're just getting started. Yes, you made some mistakes in the past, but now you're seeking to rectify them. So just like from my lived experience, like Itzel talked about it in the abstract, I'm talking about it a little bit more like personally. Give yourself compassion, give yourself grace. Like none of us are perfect, and it's our imperfection which make us better stewards. It's our imperfections that make us better, like not only like activists, but better engagers of the human experience. Because if we were perfect, who wants to deal with that, right? You know what I mean? So part of the reason I'm an effective teacher is because I had like this journey. And so like the compassion gives me the journey to understand the traumatic. So when so my trauma response was anger, you know what I mean? So like for me, I would be like, calm down, you know, and, you know, the last thing I'll say is to piggyback what Itzel said is the breath will always tell you where you are, right? So if the breath is easy, then you're okay. But if the breath gets short and, you know, your face gets short, then you're like, okay, something's triggered. What was that? Okay. Oh, and you may not know exactly what it is, but give yourself the space to let it come up and breathe your way through it. So with compassion and deep breath is what I would say.
And I think for me, one of the things that was kind of difficult for me to learn in the course of practicing meditation was that the goal was not to kind of break through something and get to the bottom of it and shatter it, you know, or annihilate it, but like some painful pattern. But the goal was really kind of balance. The goal was a different relationship to everything, so I could let in the joy and not think, I don't deserve this, you know, and somehow be deflecting it. And I could be more honestly and kindly with the pain instead of adding, you know, this is all your fault, or you're the only one, like that sense of isolation and just like all that stuff we tend to add. So the goal was really about relationship, and that meant sometimes 1 minute's worth, or you know, a few moments worth of being with some very painful thing, and not like forcing myself to endure and strain and just sit there through it. And you know, I and as a teacher, you know, I've seen so many people get into that kind of over heroic mode of like, I'm going to break through this and I'm going to conquer it or something like that. And that's not the point. The point is that kind of unrelenting compassion, you know, something we can bring forth toward ourselves. And maybe we can just do it for a few moments and that's enough. You know, then we take a break. And I think that you see that kind of wisdom in every sort of therapeutic approach, because it's important to understand where the healing actually comes. You know, and it is from reaching that capacity to hold whatever is happening in a different way.
Well, for me, so many important takeaways from this conversation, and one of them certainly is unrelenting compassion for oneself. It's a question that I think a lot of us ask ourselves who are in the helping professions. We extend that compassion to other people unconditionally and unrelentingly. Why don't we extend it to ourselves when we're working on these very hard things? I think the word that comes to me that has a lot to do with things that have already been said is the word reframing these body traumas in a way that makes them more accessible to me. And when I understand something more deeply, I'm less the victim of it in my experience. So the experience that I've talked about several times in this series last year and this year has to do with the 3 deep dives I've made into clinical depression. And they were deadly, they were extended, they were very serious. One of the things I came to understand along the line, which I hadn't really reckoned with before, is that my family tree is full of generational clinical depression. Back in the day, it wasn't named that way. And it was rarely acknowledged, including the fact that I had a great aunt who hanged herself in a barn in rural Iowa. That was a story that took years and years to come to the surface. And for a while, the trauma I carried was a sense that, you know, biology is destiny, and that my body doomed me to repetitive experiences of depression, which were sometimes reinforced by people in the medical profession who the first time told me, you know, you now have a 25% chance of experiencing a second one. And then the second time they told me, you now have a 50% chance of experiencing a third one. And the third time they told me, you now have a 75% chance of experiencing yet another one. And at that point, something rose up in me and I said, I'm not a statistic. I'm Parker Palmer. I make this claim on my own life. And in relation to what I inherited biologically, I inherited a lot of stuff from a lot of people, and a lot of it is quite wonderful. The people that I come from are decent people. They're kind people. They're people of the land and people who work with their hands. And I treasure that. I value that. And yes, of course, there is some shadow in what I inherited, but it doesn't need to dominate my understanding of them or of myself. So that was a fundamental reframing. And it leads me very much then to things that helped me go even deeper with that, such as the famous Leonard Cohen line, ring the bells that still can ring, forget your perfect offering. There's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. And I became more aware of the light that might come through that crack in me, and better able, as Reggie and everybody here is saying, to offer it up to other people in the mode of the wounded healer. And so I've come to really reframe it in a way that actually treasures it. Welcome to the human race.
Thank you, Parker. Thank you, everyone, for your wonderful answers. And it feels like it just felt so rich listening to all four of you. We're at the close of our session today. And so Sharon, I think you and Parker were going to do a bit of a closing, and Parker had invited you to do that. So I'm going to pass it over to you to close this out for today.
Well, thank you all. I mean, and thank you, Reggie and Itzel, for guiding us really, so much. And that sense of unrelenting compassion toward oneself and bringing it to life, I think is really my biggest takeaway from this time. And I would just urge everyone to be gentle. This is just a little bit of an extension of what I had said just now, because the reasons we separate or disconnect are complex, and the remembering, bringing it all together, reconnecting process is also something that will challenge us, but in different ways, to be kind instead of demanding, and to be willing to do something for a few moments and then leave it in an act of taking care of ourselves, all kinds of things. And so it's all about kind of daring to be different. That's why it's radical.
Sharon, thank you. And then just to wrap this all up, we'd love to just echo the thanks to Reggie, to Itzel, also Sharon, to you and to Parker for just an absolutely extraordinary session. Just to share this with everyone, this is part of an ongoing series this year that's happening every month on Tuesday at the same time, with an arc that's been worked out by Sharon, Parker, the Dean of our Inner Work Programs, Nancy Mortefi, and also Cheryl Frenzel. And the idea is to continue exploring different aspects of inner work. So these sessions build on one another. And so the next session, we are really, really excited to have Dan Siegel with us. And he'll be joining us to explore shadow selves. So more to come. We're looking forward to seeing you all at that session. And for those of you that choose to join in the cafe session later on this month. Thank you, everyone. And maybe just to bring us to closing, to feeling the sense of community, to signing out together and saying thank you to our wonderful guests, Reggie and Itzel, and our wonderful co-conspirators and co-hosts, Sharon and Parker. We'd love to invite you just to turn on your videos, and as we sign out, turn on your microphones and just say goodbye, thank you, as we all sign out, so we can all listen to one another. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.
Thank you so
Thanks.
much.
Wonderful
Bye.
program today.
Thank you.
Mm.